as well as permanently ones that are unclosed. Ones that are
open.
Completely
That's
open.
the word you're looking for.
Yeah, that's the word I'm looking for. Unclosed would be open. Howdy, folks, and welcome to episode 531 of the Dead Robot Society. I'm Paul E. Cooley. Joining me today is my erstwhile disco refugee, Terry Mixon.
I guess not.
Dude, they can't see that.
Oh, man.
And they can't hear it.
I could do like this.
He's doing a John Travolta pointy routine, which makes me think that he's really gotten senile in his young old age, whatever the hell. Anyway, Terry, what's up with you besides Donna Summer?
I finished a book. I got them to Tara.
Yay! Oh my God. It only took you, what, a year?
It seems like that, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think it's been a year since you've been trying to get them to Tara.
Yeah, well, but luckily the new book didn't take a year. So it's been a couple of months, but now Race to Tara is actually done and off to the copy editor. I got it done an hour before we started recording.
Wow. Congrats, man.
I am so glad. Now I can get on to doing something different.
Ah, yes.
Which means that I need to read a book.
You need to read a book?
I've got to read the last book that I wrote because it's been like almost 2 years since I did it. And I need to remind myself of what was going on.
I get confused. Is this the next one on the Humanity Unlimited?
It is.
Okay. All right. I couldn't remember if you were doing that one next or the Apocalypse.
Sadly, the Apocalypse book is going to be the middle of this year.
Apocalypse.
You know that sounds like the end of the Egyptian age. A post-apocalypse book?
Like Apocalypse? Yeah, there we go. We were just talking about names. Apocalypse. I like that. It'll confuse the hell out of everybody.
What was that X-Men movie where they had a villain that was named something like that?
Maybe it was just called Apocalypse.
I think maybe it was, but they spelled it weird with a K.
With a K?
I think so.
I'd
have to look. But nonetheless, things are good. I've got an audiobook. The Hidden Enemies book 9 of Empire, is on its way to being approved. Probably another couple of weeks and it'll be out. So, yeah, I feel like I'm accomplishing things.
I'm glad somebody is on the writing front anyway. I haven't done shit.
What?
Yeah. That's not true. I haven't done shit on the writing front, but I've been working on software for 2 projects, actually. So paying gigs, and I need the income. So that's been pretty much my focus for the last week or so.
Money is good.
Yeah, money's good. So as soon as I get to a place where I've got both of those things under control, I can dive back into my work in progress and hopefully get it back on track. Because February just seems like it's the month where everybody needs something and wants something very, very quickly. And therefore, I'm working till midnight, 2 in the morning, making shit happen. So it is what it is. But yeah, paying bills is kind of important. But I'll get back to the writing. I have to get back to the writing because this book needs to get done.
Yep. If you don't finish the book, you can't move on to the next one.
That is correct. And that's a big problem because there's a long chain of them. So we have this topic area on the Facebook group. It says it's there for Q&A and topics for us to choose from.
Mostly people just use it to insult us.
Mostly people use it to post memes about us. But anyway, every once in a while.
That's not actually what they do, but
every few months we go through the list and we call things out as much as possible. So that is what we're going to do today. So Terry, get ready for the quiz because here it comes.
I've got answers. They may not be right, but I have them.
Oh yeah, we have what we think are answers. That's really just bullshit. So, but you're used to that. Stay tuned. Here we go. Terry, we've always talked about the fact that you could submit topics for us to discover or talk about. Discover?
Hey, it's a discovery for us every single time.
Every time I open up Facebook, I'm like, oh God, what is going to be here now? So it's time to clean this out. So we're going to answer a couple of these. And one of them's really interesting right off the top of the head that I know is going to start some shit.
I can't wait. Lay it on.
Can't wait.
Lay it on me, baby.
So we got asked, how do you get past the first draft?
I don't think I understand the phrase. You mean there's more than one draft?
And away we go.
It really depends on how much change you have going on between whatever drafts you have, whatever you want to call it. I just finished writing a novel. I pretty much wrote it straight through. Now I'm going to go back and reread it and make tweaks here and there, change very few minor things. That's going to be my second draft, I suppose, and then off it goes to the copy editor.
That's the second draft.
It's going to take all of maybe 7 days to make that happen.
Okay.
Some people don't even do that. They'll cycle through while they're writing and get to the end and be done, and off it goes.
Yep. Lucky bastards.
That's not me. I've discovered that as I'm writing things, that first time through, I just don't clearly see things enough in the beginning, and I have to go back from when I finish it to make sure that everything matches up.
Correct.
It just doesn't happen.
And sometimes I have to do that after I've written 4 or 5 scenes. I have to go back and mess with it because there's something that I haven't set up and I don't know how I'm going to set up. Therefore, I need to go back and look at it to make sure I've got it set up. Because some of those things I just can't add and ad hoc. It's got to be in the discovery phase for the characters. So Terry says one pass, one post pass, and you're done. So if we want to call that a second draft, we call that a second draft. The question was really about how do you get off your ass after the first draft and motivate yourself to go edit, to do that second pass.
I can't wait to go back and read this book again. And literally, I am revved up to do it. I'll start that tomorrow morning, and I am going to be all over that. You're laughing at my new accoutrement.
Yeah, you've got this new fur stole around your neck, and I believe it's Scream. No, that's Houdini. Yes,
that's Houdini.
That is Houdini. Okay,
he's busy purring.
I'm sure he is. Yeah, kittens are so much fun. That, you know, when they're not completely and totally insane, which is most of the time anyway.
I think the problem, going back to what you were saying, is if you're finding it trouble to go back and edit, you're thinking of it as work, or perhaps it is work. You may not be writing your initial draft cleanly enough. And that is a thing. If you're too sloppy when you're writing that initial draft, you're not paying attention to the story that you're putting together, and you have to go back and basically dismember it and put it all back together again once you finished it. Maybe you should go a tad slower and be a bit more thorough as you're going through.
And yet, for years, when I've been beta reading folks' stuff, they will send me excerpts where they have written, I don't know, a couple of pages, and it's just filled with typos. Just filled with typos, bad this, bad that. And I'm like, what the fuck is this? It's like, well, it's the first draft. You just write it as fast as you can and not get hung up on any details. It's like, okay, so if you're doing that, that means you've got to go back after you've done this short story and expand it into a novel.
There is a thing called spell check. It can help you with those typos.
Well,
you should at least read through it once to make sure that you've got all the little pieces, parts, and you're not missing words. Come on now. That's basics.
It should be. But basically, these folks, the strategy was write it down as fast as you can. So omit any detail that gets in the way of just figuring out the plot. Is essentially what that strategy teaches.
I don't know that I agree with that.
You know,
not to the extreme that you're talking about.
Again, we you know, basically it's like whatever works for you. But I do have an issue with that because I think when you have to go back and for us, for me anyway, and I'm sure you're probably the same way. Excuse me, the discovery you make in some of those scenes is integral to making the story fun for the writer. And it seems like that would make it drudgery, having to go back and now I have to fill in all these details and everything else because I've already done all the fun stuff. Now I have to go do the actual work because the imagination has already seen the movie.
Yeah. For me, writing the story the first time is real fun. Going through it, just like I just finished a short story and went back through it to make sure that everything was good in it. And I got to bury myself back into the story that I was telling and make the little tweaks that made the characters more like themselves, that made the plot flow so much more smoothly and have the hints and flavor that I wanted it to have. And that's fun. I enjoy that.
Yeah, I do too.
If I wrote something so messy that I had to go back and spend a ton of work just making it readable, that would be work. I would hate it.
Welcome to my hell of continuity issues.
Houdini will assist you with that.
Do what now?
Houdini will assist you with that.
I'm sure he will. I think that's been the biggest problem of getting the entire Derelict series done, and even with the Black, is trying to tie up all those loose ends, and then any new story elements you add have to match continuity, and it gets more and more difficult each one because you put more and more constraints, and they narrow until you're basically left with very few options.
It's one of the reasons that I want to go back and do another read once I finish a book, is because I do sometimes go in and add those things, but I've got to make sure that everything matches them.
Yep. So that takes a little extra work. If it's just a normal book, though, if you've done the short story or whatever else, or you've written a novel, go back and reading it shouldn't be that bad. The editing, like Terry said, if you're finding yourself editing too much, then maybe that's what you have to address first, is more practice.
Well, that is a big difference. How many novels have you written?
Oh, God. 11 or 12, I guess, now.
I've written 14 of my own in my own name, and 4 more under a pen name, and 60 or 70 short stories. I've had a lot of practice now. I'm a little bit smoother at putting a story together than I was when I started.
Yeah.
You'll get better. Your stories won't be as messy once you get more practice in.
So the editing, I don't know about Terry, but I hate a lot of what I write, words-wise, sentence-wise. So I've had to learn that there are some times where I don't have to follow these rules that I keep adhering to because they make the sentence sound strange or whatever, and I just have to leave it where it is and move the fuck on. And sometimes I'll look at a phrase and it's like, okay, that's I can't even understand what the hell I was trying to say. Go back and either annihilate that entire paragraph, that sentence, or completely rewrite it because it is so bad. Because every once in a while it'll be like that. And I thought I was just so busy doing whatever else I was trying to do that I just wasn't even looking at that sentence and paying attention. That's fine. You're going to find those. But they shouldn't get in the way of you going back through your work, because you know, it's basically if you're writing just to write for you and you have no intention of putting it out there, you have a whole different set of rules. If you're just writing to write, who cares? If you're writing to market it, sell it, share it, whatever, then, you know, the story was real for you, but sometimes the story doesn't feel real until somebody else has read it.
The problem is that when you tell a story to yourself, the squiggly marks you put on the page isn't the whole of the story, because you've got all the other parts in your head that you're putting into a scene. You know how things look, how things sound, how things smell, all of the things that you may not write about. You've got that mental image in your head. But if you don't get enough detail on the page, then anyone else reading those squiggly marks will not see the same thing that you do.
Yeah, they're going to see squiggly marks.
They're going to see the story as you're actually saying it, and they're not going to see all the little details that you saw in your head about that scene. You've got to be able to effectively get out enough information to give them the basics without going overboard. And that's the challenge. That's a balance.
And the other thing is, if you feel like the story is going to take too much work or it's just a bad story, you basically just kind of, if you want to, just shove it away, call it a learning experience, and move the hell on. I got 3 or 4 novels that are never going to see the light of day, ever.
We're going to publish those suckers. We're going to get those things out there.
After my death, some bozo is going to go put that up there, and people are going to be like, "What the fuck is this?" And they'll be right too. So I think the trick is to remember that, once the story is done, if you want to share it, you should go back and edit it. And why not, while you're editing it, spend an hour at a time on that and then go back and write something new for an hour. You don't have to make it an entire slog. You can do it in chunks.
Just remember that when you're editing, you're not looking for perfection. You're looking for good enough, because you'll never achieve perfection. And if you try to go over it too many times, you'll just take your own voice right out of it.
Yeah, that's another problem. So anyway, that's our idiot advice.
Believe us, we're full of it. We know we have idiot advice everywhere.
So motivation, you fix that. Terry's basically says, second pass, good enough. Throw it to a copy editor and be done with it. So that's not what I do, but that's what Terry does.
I'm still working on you, man. We'll get you there.
Oh, God. Oof. If only. Anyway.
You know what you should do as an experiment, Paul?
What's that?
The next time you write a short story, go ahead and do a read-through and then pass it off to somebody and ask them what they think. Don't tell them that you haven't gone through it in the excruciating detail that you want to. Just see what they say after you make a pass to make sure that there's no typos and everything makes sense.
That's more or less what I did with the bike.
And I'm betting that they will be happy with it.
I ended up cutting 300 words.
How many words total?
It was only 2,800.
300 is just minor.
Or sorry, 3,200 before the cut.
Oh, that's fine. That's a tenth of the words. It's nothing.
Yeah, I cut it because it was just a couple of unnecessary things. I was trying to build dread. It just didn't work right. Anyway, it's something I may go revisit at some point, but I'm not going to worry about it. Anyway, so that's our advice on that one. Take it with a grain of, fecal matter it deserves.
Ooh, so grain of shit.
Yeah,
is that what we're doing?
Yeah.
I don't know what you season your food with, but there's something wrong with you.
God, Luna pooped out a Terry. Anyway, oh, I wish the camera had been focused on you at that point.
As I said.
Yeah, right. So this is a really interesting question. How do you write longer?
You don't shut up. No, the secret to writing longer is you have either more characters, more plots, more events, more troughs and valleys and peaks inside your story. And those two things, combining them together, putting them separately, those will make your story longer. More complication.
More complication.
Short stories are simple, straight to the point, and brutal. If you want to actually have a very short story, you've got to be very simple because you don't have the words to actually be long-winded. You've got to be quick. Whereas in a novel, if you want to go ahead and write longer, you just add more complication.
Or give us more time to spend with the characters.
Oh, please, God, don't spend 43 pages describing a bush.
No,
but
don't go Proust. Don't become Proustian, please, for the love of all things that are holy and unholy. Oh, good. Terry's just gonna sit there and nod. So I'll give you a perfect example. Think about a TV show like Tales from the Dark Side or something along those lines. It's like these 30-minute vignettes, whatever. There's one where you've got Bobcat Goldthwait is trying to learn how to be a puppeteer, and he's going after his idol that he wants to be like, and the kid's terrible, awful, horrible. And then there's an altercation, and we find out that, you know, the punchline, of course, is that his idol is actually, that's not a puppet attached to his arm. It's a creature. So then basically it ends with some other crazy stuff going on. Bottom line, very simple. You know, you could basically do that entire thing in maybe 8 scenes because of the way it was written and everything else. If I wanted to make that story longer, turn it into a novella, something along those lines. The kid who's the Bobcat Goldthwait character, who's basically the wants to be the protege, we would find out more about his life. We would spend more time with him. We would spend time with him going to these puppet shows and trying to do things and looking terrible and horrible. And we'd spend time doing that. And we would also put in these flashes of creepiness from maybe his idol, where things don't quite make sense the way he's doing things. And we would slowly build that up. And then the last, you know, portion of it would be this crazy jump with the creature or whatever.
I totally disagree.
You disagree?
I disagree about how you would build the story up. I don't think that if you were going to make that into a novella, you would spend more time on Bobcat Goldthwait. You would spend more time doing try-fail cycles of him trying to find out more about this other puppeteer. Rather than dwelling on his past, you would dwell on the failed efforts of him to get the information or connect with the person that he's trying to connect with. You would take the story as it exists and just keep trying it.
Yeah. We're both saying the same thing.
No, I doubt that very seriously.
We said different things. We meant the same thing. By basically what you're describing as a try-fail cycle, yes, but all of that is going to give us more information about the character. It's going to attach us to him about how this is his dream and he just cannot make it happen. And then start adding more details and more complications that start adding more suspense and more weirdness about his idol, and keep it going until you finally have the boiling point. That's how you would turn that into a novel.
Yeah. The key of what you said is cannot make it happen. Yeah. However, you as an author would want to do that, that's the key to making a story longer.
So the complications could be, you know, his amateur detective work, which may get him in trouble. You could have him basically get arrested by the cops because he gets served for stalking. I mean, there's so many ways you could take off with the basic concept of that, but by virtue of adding more of these details, more of these complications, the story gets longer.
Or you could add a side plot.
And of course, you can add the side plots. You know, what if he suddenly gets a girlfriend, she starts seeing what he's doing and inserts herself into the main plot by accident? Or that's just a constant thing that's going to be grating on creating friction with the rest of the plot. There's all sorts of things you could do there just by taking that 22-minute short and expanding it. And you're just basically going back and adding all those things to it. And suddenly you've got a novel. I mean, it's just a matter of keep doing what you need to do to make it interesting.
Don't let yourself wander away too much, though. Keep it focused enough on the story to where you're not just saying something for the sake of saying it. If you're adding things in that could be cut because they have no relevance to the story, you shouldn't be doing that.
Yeah. Don't give me a 30-page treatise on the history of mannequins. Don't do it. Please. I don't want to know. You should be able to convey all that information in 7 paragraphs. Unless the character is focused on one specific part that has any goddamn relevance to the tale, I don't need to know, and I don't want to. If I do, I have a computer right here where I can go look that shit up. So don't include it if it's not necessary, but that's how you make the story longer. In my own history, I could have made Tattoo. I could have turned Tattoo from a very short novella to a full novel had I been willing to add all the complications for it, but I wasn't willing to.
Personally, I'm a novelist. It's much more challenging to write a short story for me than it is to write a novel, because I want to take a novel and turn it into or a short story and turn it into a damn novel.
Yeah. Well, because I never do that. Because I never start out to.
What are you up to now? About 175,000 words on every novel you try?
Do what now?
Aren't you up to, like, your novels keep getting longer? I think you're up to 175,000 words now.
No. Derelict was only 130.
I like how you say that. Only 130.
Well, okay, fine. Take the entire series because it's one story and put it together, and then you got 360 grand.
Congratulations. You are now Brandon Sanderson.
I am not. That would be one book.
It is. You just got finished saying it was one story.
No,
it could be.
That's different. That's different from saying it's one book. That's different. Look at the Lord of the Rings. They're all one book or one story. God damn it. Now you got me doing it. 3 books, 1 story. Shut up. Okay. Scott Douglas asks, sequels and series. How much of the world do you need to reintroduce with each subsequent book, and how much detail do you introduce for each character? Reintroduce.
Since my stories are serialized, not in the form of actually breaking up the story into serialization, but it's one novel following along after the other, they're not standalone after the first one. It's not like a mystery series where you're beginning again with the character. I figured that my readers, if you're on book 9, if you haven't read the previous books, you deserve what happens to you. So I do reference what had gone before, but I try to keep it relatively short. The first couple of chapters, the first couple of scenes will be regrounding the characters in the events that they are in and what has happened before, if it's relevant to what they're doing at that moment.
Right.
Other than that, I don't try.
I do a little bit too, since there's so much, especially since with the recent books, it's been a year between releases, more or less, between Marines, Tomb, and Destruction. In every book, I remind everybody who these people are. I spend a little bit of time, and I will reference events from the first 2 books to get people to remember that happened. But I keep imagining people coming to the series for the first time and reading through all 3 books at one shot, or listening to all 3 books in one shot. I don't want them to spend 10 or 15,000 words getting to know everything. And that was a problem for Evolution, because I had to bring together 3 separate stories into one. 3 separate groups of characters isolated from one another, and then bring them all together in the 3rd book. That sucked, because there was a lot of things I had to remind everybody of. And it was torture. But I only did that because I had to.
I'm going to write the sequel to Scorched Earth later this year. By the time I publish it, a little bit more than 1,000 days will have passed since I published the first book. I probably should go ahead and put out a little bit of words about what has come before.
Yeah, you might want to do that. It's just like if I wrote a sequel to Closet Treats. Even though it would be standalone from the first book, I would have to remind everybody what the hell happened in the first book in some way. Even if I wrote it so it was a standalone, because it references those characters, I want to put kind of a reminder of who these people are. Plus, that means people are now going to be interested in Closet Treats and going, oh, well, maybe I should read that one first. Or, hey, I want to know how this happened in the other book that led to this. So...
And I'm going to have to go back and read the dang book again to make sure that I refamiliarize myself.
Yeah.
For that matter, the next book that I'm writing is going to be the 4th book in the Humanity Unlimited saga. And it's been in excess of a year since I wrote the last one. It's probably more than 18 months. So I'm going to have some doing that there too.
Doing that there?
Yippers.
Doing that there thingy?
Yeehaw.
The next generation?
Yeah, the next generation.
You sit here and do the patty whack. Worf doing the patty whack has got to be one of the greatest achievements in animation ever made.
That's sad.
Tells you all you need to know right there. Oh boy. So let's see. What else we got? I've written my first novel. Now what? We have several episodes on that. Oh, for pantsers or discovery writers, they're the same thing. How to prevent your story from going where you don't want it to go. I'm new to the podcast, so you may have one on this. We sort of do. Sort of do.
Well, we've talked about this before. The answer of how you keep the story from going where you don't want it to go is you have to realize where you are in the story and what's coming. If you're writing as a discovery writer, then you're not looking too far ahead. I know, as for myself, if I know what's going on a couple of scenes ahead of time, I'm ahead of the game. Usually I start having an idea of what the next scene will be as I'm writing the scene before it. So the way I would keep from going where I don't want to go is when I hit the sudden realization of where I'm headed and say, maybe I should stop and back away from this cliff because I'm already there.
I've kept myself jumping off that cliff several times. And I've actually written into some dead ends where I just didn't like where the story was going. So I just basically cut it, went backtracked to where I needed to be, and then ignored that branch or took a different one.
I've cut chapters before. There's been times where I've cut a couple of chapters because I went down a rabbit hole and said, no.
Yeah, and that's just the issue. There's certain things you have to do to make all that work, but I think you just have to trust your gut. You're the only one who has really a grip on the imagination of where you're going, what you're trying to accomplish, or what the feel of the book is. So if there's something that's not working there for you, it may not be working for the story.
Bounce it off somebody else.
Yeah, bounce it off somebody else.
If you're having some problems, go ahead and hit up somebody online, somebody you know personally, and say, hey, here's what's going on. What do I do now? What does this feel right? Does it not feel right? Get an outside opinion. Sometimes we get too close to our stories and we need to have somebody tell us something.
I'm sure I talked about this on another episode, but I'll say it again. When I was lead developer at Schlumberger, I had a group of folks, and I had a Linux Penguin. And when I first got hold of the group and took that group over, I was like, all right, this is my Linux Penguin. If you have a problem and you can't sort something out, you spend 30 minutes on it. If you hit a brick wall, go grab the penguin. Go have a conversation with the penguin. Tell the penguin what you're trying to do. The penguin will have answers for you. And more often than not, a developer would come by, grab the penguin, look sheepishly at me, walk to their desk, and come back about 5 minutes later grinning and put the penguin back on the shelf. And it happened a lot. Now, here's what it did. Because you verbalized and got it out of your head, your brain was flipping context between the two things, even if you weren't actually speaking. It's a trick to basically get you out of neutral, because if you're stuck on a problem, then it's because your brain has thought about it too much in the wrong way, the wrong answer. So you have to kind of clear the slate. How's that? How do you find out you made a silly mistake? Verbalize it or write it. You'd be surprised. You'll look at it and go, oh, yeah, that's how you do that. I used to have those epiphanies on smoke breaks all the damn time. It was hateful.
That's one of the things that a lot of people do. If you get stuck, go for a walk.
Yeah, go for a walk. Go for a walk.
Something.
Walk away. Sometimes I'll open up a new document and start writing in some other idea, and then suddenly, 3 or 4 paragraphs in, my brain goes, oh yeah, that's how we're going to do that in that other book. And I'll just, save that file and go back to work. Just, you got to find ways to kick your brain out of neutral. Try different stuff. It'll happen. What else we got? Prevent your story from going. Terry, does your story ever go where you want it to go when it involves Tara?
All I can say is they finally got there, damn it. No, rephrase what the question was. My brain went sideways on me.
Your brain went sideways on you.
It did. I was busy. You talking, Tara. I answered, and my brain forgot what I was actually answering.
How to keep your discovery writing story on track.
Discovery writing, by definition, is never on track.
Correct. If Christopher Winder asks, if I kill J.R. Handley off in a book, then clone him from his stored DNA 1,000 times, then kill the clones, can he count that as 1,001 fictional deaths?
That's a very simplistic way of looking at this. Rather than cloning him 1,000 times and then killing him off 1,000 times, you clone him 1,000 times and have them fight to the death in a gladiatorial arena so he kills himself. Is that suicide would then be the appropriate question?
Yeah, but then you can't have 1,001 of them.
Sure you can. Somebody has to survive at the end. You could shoot the last one.
Congratulations. Boom.
That's right.
Wow. Wow. I've written some cold-hearted shit in my time, but damn. That's just wrong. That is just wrong. All right, we got this. I think that's pretty much about all the questions we can cover today.
We're going to end on J.R. Handley. That's what we're going to do?
I know. It's terrible. It's awful. It's horrible. I wouldn't do it, but we kind of got forced into it, so I don't know what we do about this.
We take one more subject. That's what we do about it. We've been talking about discovery writing all this time. It seems like for at least half of this episode, discovery writing has had a theme in here. When you're doing discovery writing, here's one thing you can do to help keep track. You can outline as you go along. Basically, when you complete a scene, you write it down. If you find yourself stuck, like we were talking about earlier, read the last couple things you wrote down in your outline and see what feels like it is the next logical and emotional progression for the story. Sometimes we get blind to our own work, and it's good to take that step back, like Paul was saying, but you can look at your own outline and say, oh, this would fit in here.
One of the things I do is I name my chapters. Excuse me, in Scrivener, I name them. So if I know I've got to lay something out or I'm having a problem figuring out what the next piece is, I will put the piece that I know that is beyond the piece that I'm at, that I have to get to.
Then you'll have to jump the shark to get to it.
No, because then the middle piece comes into being by going the one beyond. So that's how that often works for me. But just putting down the names of the chapters and naming them that way, I'm able to move them around. And sometimes if I move them around, then the new shape takes form or the right shape takes form on what I'm supposed to do next. It's all a big puzzle.
That's one of the primary differences between your type of storytelling and my type of storytelling. I'm a very linear kind of guy. I'm writing the next thing that happens. I don't go and write the end of the story and then go back and write the things that happened before. I would go insane if I tried that. It's not how my brain is put together.
That is not what I do, though.
But you could.
I could, yeah.
You could totally write the big climactic scene and then go write the novel that goes in front of it that leads to those events. You could do it. I could not. I would go mad.
I don't know. Excuse me. I don't know that I ever go that far. I know I've written 5 scenes ahead before.
Yeah, I'm just using that as an extreme example.
Yeah. I don't know. Regardless, it's just a different way of looking at things. For novels like Destruction, I wrote the portion that takes place on Mira. I wrote that before I wrote any of the other pieces.
As Dean Wesley Smith says, you are unstuck in time. You as the author can go any point in the timeline you want to go. That's a very freeing thing.
Yes, in that particular case it was, because then I only had to worry about what was happening to those characters. I didn't have to flip context, and it made it a lot easier to make it continuous. And so the scene breaks, excuse me, sometimes would have been sort of abrupt if you read it without the other pieces. But by the time I put it all together, no, I think it's impossible to tell that I did it that way. And what happened on the ship informed what I needed to happen over on SNR Black, so that they were in tune. By the time we got to the end, we knew what the hell was going on in both places. So I wrote those separately, and that worked. So just a thought. If you have to get really, really focused on it, then you can write it 2 linear stories, Terry.
That's what I did in this last damn novel. I wrote 2 linear stories that headed to the same conclusion.
Welcome to my world, every book.
Was a pain in my ass, and I am never doing that again. My alpha reader tells me that I did it very well, that the story flows really well. He likes it. So it worked, but I did not have a pleasure in writing it that way. I would have been better off if I'd have written the entirety of one of the storylines and then went back and wrote the other one, but I couldn't be sure that I could synchronize the events that needed to happen so that they ended at the same amount of time. And I'm not doing that again. I have learned something.
I was listening to one of the things I found that sticks with me about Needful Things is there's these sections where he aligns everything. So like you just said, because his narrator is a character, essentially, he's able to do things like, while Polly Chalmers was thinking about this, while Brian Rusk was going home thinking about shotguns, while so-and-so was doing this was happening. And all those do not align with scene breaks. Excuse me, God. In those other pieces, each of those references a particular moment from those 3 pieces that we've already just read. And it puts everything into context for this 4th piece so that they do line up.
Mm-hmm.
I found that an interesting way to do it. And I actually love the way that story is told. So there are ways to do it, Terry. You just, you tried it. You didn't like it. So, maybe you can do it in the future sometime. Try it again. No?
I don't know. It was a pain because the problem I ran into is that I would get invested in the characters and the plot line and then have to switch to the other side. Then I'd have to start over. Once it's very hard for me personally. It's slow getting started. And once I can put scene after scene after scene into a particular story, the momentum builds. And I wasn't getting that. And that makes it tough.
Well, I think that you just kind of have to try things to get it where it goes. But you have to experiment with it. This is not something I would have done in my first book. I would have tried and failed miserably at what I was trying to do with those stories, with the derelict stuff. I'd have failed miserably. So the trick is to find the trick that it will work for you. And if you think you've got a handle on the main plot line, like I was talking about with Cujo on the pre-show, was that yeah, it was pre-show. The way in which that story is set up, it's really 4 different stories. And it may be the piece with the dog is actually what led him to write all the rest of it. But in a lot of ways, he could have written that story about her fighting the dog and that whole scene. That could have been a novella on its own without any of these other pieces that are in the book. But it would not have made a long enough book to sell at that time. So we get all this other stuff that actually kind of trails together. I have no idea how Mr. King put that together or how the book was constructed. If he basically saw all 4 threads that he needed to make this last piece happen, then yeah, that's why he's a man of American letters, so to speak, because it is really nice the way it works. And you once you listen to it or read it, it seems like all those pieces are necessary, but if you go back and think about it afterward, they're not. So it holds as a cohesive story with these 4 separate pieces that are all related. So I found that very interesting. It's just another Another thing to be aware of that folks sometimes do. So that, I think is pretty cool.
It is.
There, I pontificated. I have pontificated my maximum pontifications.
Maximum pontification. That sounds like a title of a book.
Yeah. Probably by one of those political writers. Should be anyway. All right. I think we're done with this for now.
I think we are.
I think we are. So let me close this out. If you have a question for us or a comment about some of the stupid that we said today, please send an email to show@debrobotsociety.com. You can tweet me at Paul_E_Cooley. You can join us at Facebook on Listeners of the Dev Robots Society group. You can find us on YouTube at youtube.com/DRS podcast, where you can see our ugly mugs. And if you like the show, you can support us by joining us at patreon.com/DRS podcast, where for as little as $1 a month, you get access to exclusive content, live shows, and mostly unexpurgated versions of the show. And we have to thank our wonderful host, Podhoster, who makes all 14 billion episodes of the Dead Robot Society available for your ear holes. And now, because it is the end of the show, I have to read the names of our $10 supporters. And our $10 patrons are this week: JD Barker, Commander Veronica Jagera of the Rebel Empire. Jack Faces in the crowd staring back at me as if they know me, Erickson. Kelson, what would an Empire of Bones / The Street crossover be like?
Oh my God.
Oh, bad. Isabel Cushy. Rick Shaw. Lisa, I hop this work slack. Nathan Cosby, Cheryl Winters, Tracy Bodine, John Kilgallen, Devin Lee, Drew, my brain needs a jumpstart Bernardi, Chris Winder, Andre Conde Moraes, DJ Chamberlain, and J.R. Handley.
Oscar the Grouch in powered armor.
Oscar the... Oh, my God. Oh. Wow. Wow. Thank you, patrons, for supporting this particular brand of madness. And with that, Terry, I think it's time we say goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye, patrons. Bye, everybody.